Israel's sway over Washington is now stronger than ever, and as we witness college campuses throughout the US erupt in protests against the war in Gaza, one thing is clear. We are reaching a breaking point and something major is about to happen. These protests, which started at Columbia University in New York, have now inspired students around the globe. Solidarity encampments have sprung up at over 40 colleges in the United States and as far abroad as universities in Cairo, Paris, and Sydney. As each day passes, it's becoming abundantly clear that if the US continues to support the brutality in Gaza by sending money and weapons to Israel, this could be the X factor that eventually leads to the removal of Joe Biden from the White House. Just listen to this amazing video from Mehdi Hassan, by far one of the most accurate and truthful voices speaking out on the Palestinian conflict.
We see this stuff, we see all these, he doesn't like Netanyahu, he's very upset behind the scenes, a lot of leaks to Barak Ravid and other reporters. Great, come out and say it in public. Come out and say it in public and come out and do something about it. Also, politically, who in this country likes Benjamin Netanyahu? Why are you going to bat for Benjamin Netanyahu? Why are you risking American democracy for Benjamin Netanyahu? Why are you risking your re-election for Benjamin Netanyahu? Why?
How can anyone argue with these comments? Why are we risking the future of the United States to please one man? The evidence is abundantly clear that American voters are increasingly opposed to Israel's brutal onslaught into Gaza and in favor of an immediate ceasefire. But what makes things even worse for Biden is that the most important segment of the US population, voters between the ages of 18 to 35, have turned against him and the US government. Because of social media apps like TikTok. Oh wait, maybe that's why they want to ban it. The truth can no longer be hidden, and for the first time in history, carnage, destruction, and genocide are only a few clicks away on your phone. Of course, the White House, congressional Republicans, and talking heads from cable networks want you to believe these student protesters are engaging in anti-Semitic activities and targeting Jewish students, but the reality is completely different. You see, this is where you have to do some digging and research on what's actually happening on the ground in these protests, because you can't just rely on social media to stay informed. Manipulative algorithms are often designed to track our behaviors and feed us information that reinforces our own biases, further polarizing our already divided world. Which is why I partnered with Ground News to make today's video. I use their app and website every day in my work to analyze the latest geopolitical trends. You can check them out at ground.news/Cyrus or scan the QR code on screen. Let me show you how it works. Take, for example, the Columbia University pro-Palestinian protests. I can instantly access nearly 270 articles reporting on this from across the political spectrum. With Ground News, I can instantly compare how the media is covering this story in one place without having to check multiple publications. For example, I can see how New York Magazine is pushing this story and compare that to how Israeli media, like Haaretz, are framing the story. Look at these two examples. What New York officials are saying about the Columbia University protests by city and state New York compared to this headline from the National Desk, which reads, NYPD chief rips AOC over Columbia Unity protest response. Pure hatred. Two completely different tones for the same story. Depending on which one you read, you could have a very different understanding of what's actually going on. Everyone, as a content creator, you know I only endorse products I've personally used, and I 100% believe that Ground News is an essential tool you need to understand this complex world we live in. Go to ground.news/Cyrus to stay informed on what's happening in Israel, Palestine, and around the world. Subscribe through my link for 40% off unlimited access, or try it for less than $1 this month. So what's the real story unfolding here with Columbia University students? It's actually quite simple. They want the university to stop aiding Israel's genocide. This was clearly demonstrated when 76.5% of Columbia's students voted this week for the university's $13.6 billion endowment to divest from Israel. Another 65% of students voted to end Columbia's dual degree program with Tel Aviv University in Israel. These protests have nothing to do with supporting Hamas or being against Jewish people. Instead, it has everything to do with supporting the innocent lives in Palestine. Have these Columbia students been violent? Well, here is the direct quote from NYPD Chief of Patrol John Chell. The students that were arrested were peaceful, offered no resistance whatsoever, and were saying what they wanted to say in a peaceful manner. In reality, the protesters at Columbia University have three simple demands. Number one, the university's endowment divest from all companies and organizations that do business with Israel or are profiting from the war. Number 2, the university publishes a list of all of its investments. Number 3, the school grants amnesty for the student protesters who have been suspended in earlier crackdowns on Gaza-related protests. These demands are not extravagant, nor are they unreasonable. Because of social media, today's youth is much more connected to the world around them, and the atrocities unfolding in Gaza have become too much for most Americans to now support. But of course, what the American people want and what the US government wants is two separate things. The US government is supposed to be a government that represents the people, but President Biden has proven the exact opposite, as he believes supporting Israel and its war is undoubtedly the correct, righteous path for America. But take a look at this shocking new data. Recent polling by YouGov shows that over 50% of Americans aged 18 to 29 believe Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people, and just about 40% believe Israel is an apartheid state. Israel has utterly alienated younger Americans, and once again, this is why we are seeing American universities at the center of the youth outrage against this war. However, it's not just young Americans. Take a look at how American voters are disapproving President Biden's handling of the Israel-Palestinian conflict. In mid-November, when a temporary ceasefire began, Americans were essentially split down the middle in their support of Israel. But fast forward a few months, and the blue line of support has never been farther away from the red line of disapproval. What this graph is simply telling us is that the vast majority of all Americans, regardless of age, have turned against Israel's breathtaking brutality in Gaza. And let's be honest, they are doing so for good reason, as Netanyahu's cabinet is filled with far-right religious extremists who believe that Israel's brutality in Gaza is fulfilling God's command. Think I'm exaggerating? According to the book of Joshua in the Hebrew Bible, God promised the land to the Jewish people and instructed them to destroy other nations living in the promised land. This text is used by extreme nationalists in Israel today, including the Israeli government, as well as many of the 700,000 or so Israeli settlers living in the occupied Palestinian lands in violation of international law. Netanyahu is pursuing the religious ideology of the 7th century BC in the 21st century today. Netanyahu and his government is the most extreme, far-right, and religiously conservative in the nation's history, and most certainly of any democracy in the world. The simple truth is that the vast majority of Americans are not in line with Israel's religious zealots at the highest levels of its government. They simply don't accept the biblical idea that Israel should kill or expel the people of Palestine from their own land. In a 2020 Pew survey, only 32% of American Jews believe that God gave the land that is now Israel to the Jewish people. What's more, 63% believed in the feasibility of peace between Israel and Palestine through the two-state solution. Most notably, there's long been a significant and continuously growing group of not in our name Jews in the US, but also across the world. This group of Jewish people are openly against Israel's brutal invasion and occupation, against Netanyahu and his extremist government, and are publicly calling for an immediate ceasefire. Even the highest-ranking Jewish politician in the US government, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, took the brave step forward. And after months of contemplating what he should do, Schumer finally had the courage to call out Netanyahu and ask for his removal.
As a lifelong supporter of Israel, it has become clear to me the Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th. Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost his way by allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel.
So if Americans are increasingly turning against Israel, what about the rest of the world? Actually, Israel's extraordinary brutality in Gaza is uniting the entire world against it. In a recent UN General Assembly vote, 174 countries, which represents 94% of the world population, voted in favor of political self-determination for Palestine, while only 4 countries, including Israel and the United States, voted against it. The world's alignment against Israel is now reaching a zenith, as multiple countries have formally called out the country and accused it of ethnic cleansing amongst other war crimes. The New York Times recently broke this story that Israeli officials believe the International Criminal Court is preparing arrest warrants over the war. The officials said that they believe that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israelis could be charged. This is just another major blow to Israel after the International Court of Justice has already determined Israel is plausibly committing genocide. The truth is that Israel has now become increasingly isolated from the rest of the world, and now depends entirely on its remaining true supporter and enabler of the war, which of course is the United States. Why is the US government stubbornly maintaining its position of unconditional support for Israel and its appetite for war and destruction, even though Americans and indeed the world are increasingly against it? The truth is disturbing, although likely not surprising to those who know how the US government really works and who the real power is in Washington. President Biden, in fact, knows that world opinion is shifting against him and Israel, and he knows that he's bleeding young voters by continuing to unconditionally support Israel. However, the dark reality is that neither he nor anyone else in the US government has the capacity to change course. The shocking truth is that Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu hold immense power over the US government and its foreign policy. But the bizarre fact here is that Joe Biden is literally supporting a foreign government and prime minister who doesn't even want to see him be reelected as US president. Once again, here is Mehdi Hasan telling the truth of the situation.
Who does Benjamin Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir want to be the next president of the United States? They say Trump. So from that perspective, as critical as I am of Joe Biden, and I am very, very critical of Joe Biden on this issue, the reality is the people we loathe, I think most of us loathe in the Israeli government, they want Donald Trump to be president. So I think we should bear that in mind when we go to the polling stations.
So even though US voters are showing their frustration with Biden by threatening to vote someone else in office, the alternative in Donald Trump is even worse. But this is what American democracy now represents: a choice between bad, and most importantly, no chance at a positive change in the future. It seems bizarre that a tiny country of less than 10 million people could keep the world's biggest military superpower in such a chokehold, but here we are. Of course, a central component of this power is the incredibly powerful Israel lobby, the lead organization of which is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC. This organization holds tremendous power over the President of the United States and the US Congress. And once again, we have a powerful lobbying group having a tremendous sway over US politicians. The Israeli lobby has spent vast sums of money in campaign contributions to ensure that pro-Israel policies always prevail, and AIPAC's long-running success is to turn millions of dollars of campaign contributions into billions of dollars of US aid to Israel. Currently, AIPAC aims to turn around $100 million of campaign funding for the November presidential election into a $16 billion supplemental aid package for Israel. To give you an idea of just how much power Israel and the AIPAC have over the US government, consider that in private, many US politicians, even President Biden himself, have actually become increasingly frustrated with Netanyahu. President Biden has said he's trying to get Israel to agree to a ceasefire, but according to aides close to the president, Biden recently stated in private that Netanyahu is giving him hell and is impossible to deal with. In public, however, it's a very different story. Remember the clip from Mehdi Hasan earlier. Anyone can criticize someone behind closed doors, but we need an American president who has the guts to say it publicly and actually make a change. While the Biden administration has recently made some statements showing concern over Israel's warpath, they've frankly been too little, too late, and simply pathetic given the carnage and war crimes currently unfolding in Gaza. Just take Antony Blinken's statement in Tel Aviv on February 7th, which proved just how unwilling the US government is to criticize, much less restrain Israel. It will be up to the Israelis to decide what they want to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it. No one's going to make those decisions for them. All that we can do is to show what the possibilities are, what the options are, what the future could be, and compare it to the alternative. And the alternative right now looks like an endless cycle of violence and destruction and despair. So basically, Antony Blinken said, we'll show you the bad outcomes, but no worries, it's your call, and you can of course just continue to do what you want to do. Or take Biden's recent pathetic proposal for a ceasefire, in which he called a ceasefire as soon as practicable, whatever that means. Of course, in practice, it would mean that Israel could simply declare a ceasefire to be impractical. But in reality, the US government's actions speak much louder than its words. It recently enacted a ban on the aid to the UNRWA, the largest relief agency in Gaza, until 2025, even as the entire population of Gaza is now starving. What's more, the Biden administration just greenlighted yet another military aid package to Israel of almost $4 billion. The sad truth is that Biden is caught between the powerful Israeli lobby and the opinion of the American voters, and indeed of the world community. However, his actions clearly reveal that it is Netanyahu, not Biden or much less the American voter, who still calls the shots in Washington. And it's become abundantly clear that Biden must oblige to Israel's demands for more US bombs and weapons, even if it means destroying his chances of getting re-elected. The simple truth is that no matter how much power Israel, Netanyahu, or the AIPAC may hold in Washington, the Biden administration could end this war tomorrow if it simply grew a pair, said enough is enough, and declared that it's cutting off Israel from any further aid until it agrees to an immediate ceasefire and a two-state solution. Simply put, this scale of devastation is only possible because of the huge financial, political, and military support from the United States. President Biden needs to take back US policy from the Israeli lobby. The US should stop backing Israel's extremist and utterly illegal policies. It should stop spending any more funds on Israel unless and until Israel lives within international law, including the Genocide Convention and 21st century ethics. Biden should side with the UN Security Council in calling for an immediate ceasefire and indeed in calling for an immediate move to the two-state solution, including recognition of Palestine as the 194th UN member state, a move that is more than a decade overdue since Palestine requested UN membership in 2011. Everyone, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend it with me here on YouTube as we discuss these important events that are influencing geopolitics around the world. Once again, I want to thank Ground News for sponsoring today's video. Ground News is the tool that I literally use every single day in my job as a geopolitical commentator, and if you want to uncover the truth about the world around us and see through the media bias, you can try Ground News today for as little as $1. Simply click the link down in the description to get started. Thank you all for your amazing support, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.